So let's zoom in on some of these principles of our regime. So I think there's three that you talk about in the book. So the first one is democracy, and I found it really interesting reading this section, just because I find when you hear people talking about democracy on TV or on the news, it's always democracy is always a positive thing, and more democracy is always better. But as you're kind of been highlighting a bit earlier and just now, democracy kind of has its vulnerabilities and it has its dark sides to it. Can you just help us? How should we be thinking about democracy that gives proper consideration to the whole picture of what democracy is and what these vulnerabilities are?
A great question. Chapter one of the book, it contains a very small typology of regimes according to thinkers like Aristotle and Plato from ancient Greece, and they thought that democracy was one of the worst regimes, actually. And if you could find one virtuous person, like give them the power, like there, we're done. We have the person who understands, who embraces the public good, who is capable of personal restraint, who can subordinate his or her interests to those of the good of the whole political community. And this person has wisdom and prudence and caution. Like if you can find that person, like give that person the power. Make this person the king. And now there are a lot of pretenders. There are a lot of people who say, yeah, I'm that guy. Like I'm great. Pick me. And of course, what Plato said is beware the person who is applying for the job. Typically, the best person is going to have to be cajoled and convinced to take this on. Don't fall for the pitchman. But of course, and so you can see the problem with this view that the best regime is like the monarchy, the regime led by the one good person. You got succession problems, first of all, of course, but there are a lot of like how do we know who's going to be the good person? I guess it's almost like you have to be good yourself to recognize a good leader, and so there is that sort of problem. But anyway, like the best regimes would be three sort of in number: a monarchy, an aristocracy, which is the rule of the few who are excellent. Aristoi is the Greek word for excellence. And then it turns out the Greeks thought that democracies could not be good regimes because democracies are ruled by the many. And in ancient Greece, the many were very poor, very uneducated, and unable, never mind unwilling, but unable to deploy the kind of sort of intellectual skills to understand and advance the public good over and against their own private goods. And the ancient Greeks had a very low view of democracy because they said, well, the people they'll vote their stomachs, and they'll vote for whoever will fill their stomachs. That's basically how it is. So our challenge has always been to say democracy is actually better than the risks that one must take with aristocracy, which can become simply an oligarchy, kind of like the post Cold War Russian regimes leading up to Putin, and better than and more reliable than monarchies, which can become tyrannies. And so you can think of the Assad family, in Syria as an example, if you like. But we've got to do something to make sure that democracies don't operate to their own destruction. And so it means a couple of things. Democracies can be good, but they need to be mixed with the elements of the other regime types. And so what we do, I think, are a couple of things to try to save democracy from itself. One thing is increase the wealth and the education of the citizens. Because if I have a modicum of wealth, that means I'm not spending my time hungry and looking for my next meal. Like we need minimum measures of resources to afford us the leisure to think about things beyond ourselves. The Greeks were all about leisure, but they understood leisure to be a state where you are free from the requirements of bodily necessity. And freedom from hunger would be like the most obvious one. Because when you and I are really, really hungry, we actually can't think of anything else except how to fill our stomachs. And how about living a life like that? Okay? So what we try to do is we try to think about creating wealth for all so that each of us can have the leisure to think about public things. And then in public education is the next piece of that, so that we can actually be liberated from the slavery to our own desires. We can actually think about our desires rather than act upon them automatically all the time. But then the other thing is, and this is like a really big, important innovation, really, and that is to introduce the idea of representation into democratic life so that we, on occasion, can have direct democracy, let's say in the form of referendums, where all the electors as a group can vote on a certain public policy measure. But in the main, what we do is we will have occasions when the broad electorate will vote for people who will represent them in the legislative halls of power. And what this means is it incorporates kind of an aristocratic principle into democratic life by setting up circumstances in which candidates will present themselves to us as the most excellent choice that the citizens can make for their good and for the good of the whole. And so, in principle, an election in Canada is sort of it's an election of the most excellent leaders on our behalf. And that is a way to kind of incorporate the aristocratic idea into democratic life. And so the solution here then is to mix some of the best elements of the other regime types, rule of the one, rule of the few, into the rule of the many to prevent democracy from its inevitable slide into dissolution or tyranny.